On the 15th day of October in the year 1987, the red dust of Ouagadougou was stained darker than usual. It was not just blood that soaked into the dry earth of Burkina Faso that afternoon. It was the stolen future of an entire continent. When the gunshots rang out, silencing the voice of Captain Thomas Sankara, a deafening silence fell over Africa. The man they called the upright man, the visionary who had dared to look the old colonial masters in the eye and refuse their charity, lay dead. He was 37 years old. His body was hastily buried in a shallow, unmarked grave, hidden away as if the murderers believed that dirt could stifle a flame. The architects of his assassination, the traitorous Blaise Compaoré and his shadowy backers in the intelligence agencies of Paris and Washington, believed they had solved the problem. They believed that by killing the vessel, they could kill the spirit. They toasted to their success, believing the revolution was over. They were wrong. They forgot the final warning Sankara had issued just weeks before his death, a prophecy that would hang over the Sahel like a dormant storm for 35 years. While revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas. For 3.5 decades, Burkina Faso slumbered in a nightmare of mediocrity and submission. The country returned to being a beggar state, bowing to the whims of the International Monetary Fund, watching its gold and cotton flow out to Europe while its children went hungry. The spirit of dignity seemed to have evaporated, replaced by the cynicism of survival. But in the invisible realm, in the collective subconscious of the people, something was waiting. A clock was ticking. The elders in the villages whispered that a spirit cut down in its prime does not vanish. It wanders, gathering strength, waiting for the precise moment when the stars align and the need is greatest to return and finish the work. Then came the year 2022. The world was in chaos. A global pandemic had shattered economies. War was raging in Europe. And in the Sahel, jihadist terrorism was threatening to erase Burkina Faso from the map. The government was weak, the army was demoralized, and the people were desperate. It was in this moment of existential darkness that a young captain emerged from the shadows of the artillery regiments. He stepped onto the national stage not with the pomp of a politician, but with the grim determination of a soldier who has nothing left to lose. When the world saw his face, a collective shiver ran down the spine of the nation. He was young, 34 years old. He was lean, with eyes that burned with an intensity that felt terrifyingly familiar. And on his head, he wore a red beret. His name was Ibrahim Traoré. But for millions of Africans watching across the continent and in the diaspora, they did not just see a new military junta leader. They saw a ghost. The resemblance was not merely physical, though the similarities were uncanny. It was energetic. It was as if the tape of history had been paused in 1987 and suddenly pressed play again in 2022. The cycle had closed. The upright man had returned. To understand the magnitude of what is happening in West Africa today, one must look beyond the sterile analysis of geopolitical experts and Western think tanks. They look at spreadsheets, military capabilities, and diplomatic cables. They fail to see the spiritual dimension of the war for Africa's soul. They fail to see that Ibrahim Traoré is following a script that was written before he was born. The parallels between Sankara and Traoré are so precise, so methodically exact, that they defy the laws of coincidence. They suggest a destiny. Consider the timeline, the cold mathematics of fate. Thomas Sankara was assassinated in October 1987. Less than a year later, in 1988, Ibrahim Traoré was born. In many African spiritual traditions, this timing is significant. The departure of one great soul creates a vacuum that nature immediately seeks to fill. Traoré grew up in the shadow of the betrayal, breathing the air of a country that had lost its way. He joined the military, and not to serve the corrupt regime of Compaoré, but to protect the people. Like Sankara, he was forged in the fire of combat, serving on the front lines against extremists, eating the same dust and facing the same death as his soldiers. This is the first mark of the reincarnation, the rejection of the palace for the trench. When Sankara took power in 1983, he did not do so for glory. He did so because he famously said, "Woe to those who gag the people." He sold off the government's fleet of Mercedes-Benz limousines, forcing ministers to drive the cheapest car available, the Renault 5. He slashed his own salary to $450 a month. He forbade his portrait from being hung in public offices because there are 7 million Thomas Sankaras. He was an ascetic, a monk in camouflage. Fast forward to 2022. Ibrahim Traoré seizes control, not to enrich himself, but to save a collapsing state. His first actions were a mirror image of 1983. He refused the presidential salary, opting to keep his captain's pay. He stripped away the unnecessary protocols. He is seen sitting on the ground with his troops, sharing their rations, sleeping in tents. This is not a public relations strategy. It is a fundamental state of being. It is the behavior of a man who understands that leadership is a burden, not a privilege. This radical humility terrifies the Western powers more than any weapon system. They can bribe a greedy man. They can threaten a man who has assets to lose. But what do you do with a man who wants nothing for himself? What do you do with a man who lives as if he is already dead, dedicated entirely to a cause? You cannot control him. The prophecy of return is not just about lifestyle. It is about the unfinished war against imperialism. Sankara's greatest crime, in the eyes of the West, was his demand for total sovereignty. He told the French President François Mitterrand to his face that relations must change. He called for a united front of African nations to refuse to pay the colonial debt, arguing that the debt had already been paid in blood and resources. "If we pay, we die," Sankara said. "If we don't pay, they won't die." Today, Ibrahim Traoré stands at the Russia-Africa summit and echoes these exact sentiments with a ferocity that makes diplomats tremble. He does not ask for permission. He expelled the French ambassador. He tore up the military accords that allowed French troops to occupy Burkina soil for decades. He banned the propaganda outlets of the former colonizer. When he speaks of the imperialist hydra, it is the same voice, the same cadence, the same fearless intellect that spoke in 1984. He has formed the alliance of Sahel states, AES, with Mali and Niger, realizing Sankara's dream of a federation that erases the artificial borders drawn by Berlin and Paris. It is as if Traoré picked up the map that Sankara left on his desk 40 years ago and simply got back to work. But there is a darker, more chilling aspect to this resurrection. It is the aspect of danger, betrayal, and the spiritual shield. Sankara was killed because he was too trusting. He believed that his brotherhood with Blaise Compaoré was stronger than the seduction of French money. He refused to arrest his friend even when intelligence reports warned him of the plot. He went to his death with open eyes, perhaps accepting it as a necessary sacrifice to water the tree of liberty. Traoré seems to possess the memories of that fatal mistake. He carries the wisdom of the dead. Since taking power, there have been multiple attempts to overthrow him. Intelligence agencies from the West, working with local compradors, have tried to infiltrate his inner circle. Mercenaries have been hired, Plots have been hatched in neighboring capitals. Yet, every single time, the plot is exposed hours before execution. The assassins are caught. The money trails are uncovered. It is as if Traoré has eyes that see through walls. The people of the Sahel believe that this is not just military intelligence. They believe he is protected by the ancestors. They believe that the spirit of Sankara, having learned the bitter lesson of 1987, is now whispering in Traoré's ear, warning him of the snakes in the grass. "Do not trust them," the spirit whispers. "Watch the one who smiles too much. Check the cargo of that diplomatic plane." Traoré moves with a vigilance that Sankara lacked. He is ruthless with traitors because he knows the cost of mercy. He is correcting the timeline. He is rewriting the ending of the story that was tragically cut short. This spiritual continuity explains the magnetic pull Traoré has on the global African diaspora. From the streets of Harlem to the hills of Jamaica, young black people who were not even alive when Sankara died are finding themselves inexplicably drawn to this captain in Burkina Faso. They watch his speeches on TikTok and YouTube, transfixed. They feel a resonance that defies logic. It is the call of the blood. It is the recognition of an archetype that has been missing for too long. For decades, the black world has looked for a hero, a savior who would not sell out, who would not compromise, who would stand tall against the global system of oppression. They found bits and pieces in others, but in Traoré, they see the complete picture. They see the return of the warrior king. This creates a metaphysical problem for the West. They are used to fighting political movements. They know how to sanction economies. They know how to bomb cities. But they do not know how to fight a resurrection. They are engaged in a battle against a ghost. Every time they attack Traoré in the media, calling him a putschist or a warlord, they only strengthen his legend. They make him more mythical. They are inadvertently proving to the African masses that he is indeed the chosen one. For if the devil attacks him so fiercely, he must be on the side of the angels. The energy in Ouagadougou today is electric. It is not the manic energy of a riot, but the focused, heavy energy of a sacred ritual. The youth paint murals of Sankara and Traoré side by side, their faces merging into one. They wear T-shirts that read Sankara Lives. They join the volunteers for the defense of the homeland, VDP, in the tens of thousands, ready to die for a country that finally feels like their own. This is the great awakening that Sankara predicted. He knew that he was just a precursor, a John the Baptist figure preparing the way for a generation that would be fearless. Traoré is the avatar of that generation. However, the story is not yet finished. The danger is higher than ever. The enemies of African sovereignty are regrouping. They realize that the psychological contagion of Traoré's leadership is spreading to Senegal, to Guinea, to Chad. They know that if Burkina Faso succeeds, the entire colonial francophone structure collapses. The stakes are total. They will try again to kill the body. They will try to find a new Blaise Compaoré. They will try to crash the economy. But this time, the outcome may be different. This time, the leader is not alone. He is surrounded by a population that has awakened from the coma. He is flanked by allies in Bamako and Niamey who share the same vision. And he is armored by the spiritual certainty that he is walking a path that was destined. Ibrahim Traoré is not merely a man navigating the treacherous waters of geopolitics. He is a vessel. He is the answer to the prayers whispered by grandmothers in the villages for 30 years. He is the retribution for the crime of 1987. When he looks into the camera, his eyes do not just see the audience, They seem to look past the present, staring directly into the judgment of history. He knows that his time may be short, just as Sankara's was. He speaks with the urgency of a man running against the sunset. But he also knows that the flame has been passed. The prophecy is no longer a thing of the future. It is happening now, in real time, broadcast in high definition to a watching world. The grave is empty. The red beret has been picked up from the dust. The revolution has resumed exactly where it was paused. Thomas Sankara is dead. Long live Ibrahim Traoré. The ghost has returned, and this time he is armed.